Welcome to episode number 5 of Inside the Books. And today's guest is the master of AirBNB, BrIckellcigar. When anybody asks me about AirBNB, I refer them to you because I've just watched you do some amazing things over the past year or so as I've been following you. And then we were kind of going back and forth, keeping track of each other. We was on that race to 30 in Toro. So looking forward to some great conversation today. Why don't you let the viewers get a little bit of background on you?
Well, I'm BrIckellcigars on Instagram. I've been doing AirBNB now for about 7 years. We started this journey before, like you talk about working for corporate and having that type of job. I used to work the type of job that nobody quits. Everybody, well, the only way they quit is when they die. So, that's kind of how I got my job, because somebody had died. And I was like 22 years old, and they brought me on. I worked for BMW, Rolls-Royce, and Bugatti. So it's the guys that work there, a bunch of older guys, were kind of phasing out. That some of them were retiring or dying, and they brought me on board. And I thought I had a dream job, and I worked that job from my early 20s to my early 30s, and it was good for while it lasted. But one day I read that book. I don't know if you read it, The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah. And
it kind of like it changed my perspective on what I wanted to do with myself and my time. And I just quit my job, kind of like what you did.
Let's stop right there real quick, because that's interesting. You know, you're saying you had this job, working at some of these luxury car lots, and then you have this epiphany where you're like, I want to quit my job. Well, what was next is that at that point. But I think also it's interesting because I'm kind of going through the same crossroads as I'm in the process of leaving my corporate job. So there's some of the conversations that we had in the past. I feel like we had a lot of things in common. So that's what really wanted to make sure, made me want to make sure that I had you to be one of the first interviews that we did for Inside the Books podcast. So let's just talk a little bit about, what was that aha moment that made you say, you know what, I'm earning good money here, working at these luxury car lots, but I think it's time for me to go ahead and transition and do something different.
Well, I mean, imagine I was making $300,000 to $400,000 a year, and I had done that for quite some time, and I felt that there was really no future in it for me. I looked around, and I could see the guys that they were 70 years old they had started when they were 20, like me. So I mean, I didn't want that, because first of all, when you work in a job like that, you really, even though you have some sort of paid vacations, it's kind of hard to take a vacation when you're a commissioned employee, and you feel like you're missing out. So you end up never taking time off, and it's rough on your health. And so I read that book, and they had made some changes to the way they were paying us, and it just basically gave me kind of the spark to just quit my job. And I basically just quit. And this is the reason well, maybe you don't know this, but the reason why my name is BrIckellcigars is because I quit my job and I opened up a cigar business. And it was something that I was kind of into. I didn't really know a whole lot about it, other than I like cigars. And I started this cigar business, BrIckellcigars. And in short order, I mean, over like a 2-year period, I pretty much lost everything. Everything that I had worked for 14 years, my credit, my savings, anything that I had was lost. They repossessed all my cars, and I got evicted from my house. So I wound up kind of like staying like with a friend, me and my wife, at a friend's place, and basically homeless because of the cigar thing. But the great thing that happened by me opening up that cigar shop, I met the guy that gave me the reason to start my whole Airbnb business. So it's just like one of those things that if I didn't go through all that pain, I would have never had the business that I have today. Because one of our best customers at the cigar shop, he saw kind of what was going on with me, and he knew I had a real estate license, and he basically gave me a bone to help him buy this property. And through the transaction, he told me that what he was going to do with it, because it was kind of in a bad neighborhood. And I was like, really, you're going to like we're paying the tenants $5,000 to move out. I mean, you're my friend. I need this commission, but I mean, you're going to be going through the same thing. And he's like, well, I'm not going to rent to those tenants. I'm going to like furnish the place and put it on this thing called Airbnb. And he once he explained to me, I said, wow, that's pretty cool. Some people are actually willing to do that, like rent a house from you like that, like short term. And I also, like at that same moment, I started doing a little research about it. And there was a guy in New York at that point that was like making $1 million a year or something on Airbnb. He was like one of the first like millionaires on Airbnb. And I was like, wow, this is a good idea, man. But I knew I didn't have the credit anymore to buy a place or had any money. So I was like,
right there real quick. So, this is really getting interesting. So from the time that you leave that job at the luxury car lot where you're doing high six figures, at what point did you transition to get your real estate license? Also at the same time you opened up the cigar shop. So how did that all transpire, getting your real estate license and then coming to the point where you're utilizing your real estate license to make your entry into the Airbnb world?
well, like as I was while I was working at the car place, and they were making some changes, so I started looking for other opportunities. And one of the opportunities I always heard of was, real estate's good. And so I quickly, as I was still working there, I got my real estate license, and I wasn't really doing anything with it other than I got licensed, and it gave me access to the MLS, and then I just started this cigar business. So I needed some kind of income, so I started like trying to put together rentals and whatever I could do to make a few thousand a month extra to try to pay the bills, and that's how I got introduced to the real estate thing. And if I didn't have the license, I wouldn't have been able to meet this guy. Well, I would have met him, he was my customer, but he wouldn't have thought of me to do the deal, and I would have never heard of Airbnb at that magic moment that I did, where it gave me kind of like the aha, like when I realized when what he was doing. And then I looked on the MLS and I found in that neighborhood, there was a bunch of rentals that were kind of the same setup. Because what I sold them was like a duplex. There was 2 houses on 1 lot. And when I looked on the MLS in that same neighborhood for rentals, there was a bunch of houses with guest houses. So it was like little duplex situation. And I ran the numbers and I said, wow, if this works out, I told my wife, maybe we won't be in so much trouble. We can if we do this right, we can live for free. We'll have like a nice house. And that was kind of like our only goal at that point, was just to have a place to live, basically. And we did with the commission from that deal. I was able to, and I borrowed a couple grand from my dad, I think, and I was able to rent this place. And as soon as I put it on the Airbnb platform, it rented like total 1,000 over my total expenses, including like the rent and water and everything. So I was 1,000 cash flow positive on my personal rent, like on a place I didn't even own. That was my first.
I think that's the interesting part, and not to cut you off, because a lot of people had a misconception that the only way to get into Airbnb, well, not the only way, but they think the right way to do it is to try to acquire some property and then go ahead and stage it, and then at that point set it up on Airbnb, and that's how they're going to start that business. But the interesting thing is, you're controlling millions of dollars of real estate, but you don't own the buildings. I think that's the magical thing that you have going, and you found a way to scale it at a rate that others haven't found out how to do. And that's what really, to me, sets you apart from a lot of the other people that's out there that are doing Airbnb. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that it's different, like a lot of the people I see in the marketplace, I mean, they're kind of like where I was 7 years ago. Like they have 3 or 4 properties, and it's cool at that point. I mean, you can make some money. And when I got to like, let's say 10 properties, I was making enough income where I was actually really comfortable, and I could have stayed there, because at 10 properties, not owning any of them, I was making like almost what I was making as a high level salesperson. So, and I basically didn't have to work for like 2 hours a day or something. So, but then there's a transition.
Right there, you said you only have to work a couple hours a day. So that shows how intentional you was from what you read. in that book that we talked about a little bit before, but in order to only have to work a couple hours a day, that means you had to set up some real good automation and some real good systems and processes.
Well, exactly. I mean, systems are key. And like at first, like let's say when we first started this, me and my wife would do all the cleaning, we'll do kind of everything. And then once we got to like 6 or 8 properties, then you start thinking, well, you know, I don't want to, well, first of all, there's not enough hours to like clean anymore because there's only like people check out at 11 and the next group checks in at 4. So, you know, between 2 people, there's only so many places you could clean anyway. So we started looking for staff to do the work. And then that was good. We found a few people and then we didn't have to do that work. And then basically I was just doing customer service. And then we figured out some tools to automate the customer service. So then basically like my job was like, I had like this little compound of Airbnbs where I would just hang out and talk to customers and get to know people. And to me, it was kind of like a dream scenario at that point, because it was really like a early adapter type of situation where people would like, oh, they'll sit there and talk to me for 5 hours because they couldn't believe I had this property with all these, like I had tiny houses, I had RVs, I had all these little buildings and stuff in this one property, and I didn't own the place. So it was just a place that I was renting that I kind of like turned it into like a compound. And it was, you know, it was paying well, and I kept, but again, the difference is like, I just kept going. I kept getting more units, and like, when I scaled, like with my second level of scaling, then I one of the guys that I met that was one of my Airbnb guests, he became my agent to get more like these bigger deals, because I was able to at that point get some funding, which was key. Like if you're trying to go like the next level, and I remember I started with seed capital of like $1,500 or something, and I got myself up to like 12 units, just kind of re-rolling my revenue. And I got pretty smart with like house hacking, where we would like rent our main house, we would rent it out when it was like higher demand, and we would go stay at another Airbnb that was like $90 and we'll rent our house for $1,000. And that's the way we would like fund these expansions of getting more units, is just by renting our own house out. So
basically a lot of what you were doing. So basically, as you started getting income, you were pushing all the income back into the business, so that will put you in a situation to help you scale further. I mean, faster, right?
exactly. And remember, like most people think that they have to make $1 million, but the first thing you have to do is get to zero. Like I teach people this all the time. Getting to zero is the key. Like most people don't understand that the thing that holds them most back is like they have all these little bills and rent and all this stuff that before they know it, they could never do anything. But like once I got to zero, like my rent was zero, my car payments were zero, everything was zero. Like everything I would earn would just then go into getting more units to continue this perpetual money making machine that I had.
When you say get to zero, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by get to zero?
Getting to zero means like your net output is zero, meaning like your rent is zero, your car payment is zero, because it's being paid by like that first investment of $1,500. So like my house was free because I would rent the guest house and it made like 1,000 positive. That 1,000 positive paid all the bills that I would have and maybe my car payment. So now like I'm at zero output, and I could then, if I get another unit, everything I earn from that, I could either spend it on nonsense, or I could use it to get more real estate. And what I chose to do is I chose to get more units and keep scaling my company up.
So you would say one of the key things to your success was basically structuring a plan to where there was always going to be an asset in place to pay for what most people would consider a liability. So then that puts you at that 0 point that allows you more flexibility to decide which route you want to go next.
Exactly. Because imagine, like, once you don't have that rent payment over your head, and trust me, this getting to zero thing, I still do it today. Just like most people don't understand. It's like my house now. I live in like a pretty big house, but I got it, and I've talked on a lot of IG videos about it. The reason I got this house is because it has like the same thing. It has like a little guest house situation where I could rent it on Airbnb. And this is a more substantial mansion type property. It has a dock. So I ran my dock out to a charter operator, and I partnered up with him. So then I get a percentage of each charter that he does for my dock. So between those two situations, I actually am able to live there for pretty much like $900 a month in a $2.5 million house.
I thought that's the ultimate house hack.
Well, I've been telling people to do this forever. I don't see too many of them trying it, but if you find a house like that, and you want to know, the funny thing is, most of my neighbors, these older white guys, they've been doing this house hack in that neighborhood for 20 years. They just don't, like, you wonder how these guys afford these mansions. All of them do like these little charter businesses from their docks, and they have this free boat because the boat is going out there making money for them, and they have these little guest houses, and they've always been doing this even before there was Airbnb. And everybody, oh, these guys are so rich, they have these big houses, but these houses are actually free. These guys are paying a lot less than you pay for your apartment, and they live in a mansion. You just don't understand the reality, and you think it's impossible. Is what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the misconceptions out there, and it's because it's the lack of information and the lack of access. And I think that's what people like me and you and Pushman and Natty and Dave Shan, we bring to the table, that we're actually giving people access to information that can be life-changing. But one thing that's important is they really want to get the nuts and bolts to really take it to another level. When people pay, they pay attention, and a lot of people consume a lot of free information, but then they're scared to invest in themselves. But investing in yourself is what's really going to help you get to the next level.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing. When exactly what you said, when you pay, you do pay attention. Like most people, if they get it for free, I see sometimes we give away a free mentorship or something, and they don't do anything with the mentorship. They hardly even like join any of the Zooms or anything. But the people, when they pay $5,000, trust me, they're there, and they want to absorb as much information as possible, right?
So what was that moment that really took you to the next level? Like for me, I'm big on creating a number. So I always tell my mentees, I want you to create a financial freedom number, because people think being rich means you have to have millions of dollars, but it isn't really about being rich. It's about being wealthy. And if your overhead was $8,000 a month and you could bring in $11,000 a month, you're rich, because guess what? Everything is covered and you can go and do whatever it is that you want. So I try to tell everybody to have two numbers, have that financial free number, and then have that goal that's really going to set you at a whole nother level to allow you to live the life of your dreams. So, that's kind of where we set the action plans is, okay, let me get to that financial freedom number, and then let me work to that number that lets me kind of ball to our fall type of number. So what did you do to kind of let you transition, and what was the goal that you kind of set for yourself and say, you know what, I want to get to X, Y, and Z, and this is how I'm going to do it. And then also you talked about, having some challenges, with your credit from the situation from leaving the job and pretty much being homeless. Like how did you maneuver to be able to get to the point where you're scaling now and get the credit back on track, and not only have multi-million-dollar worth of business coming in from Airbnb, but then even adding Toro into the mix and being very successful on that platform as well?
Well, I mean, look, in the beginning, I remember I told you about that guy that was making like $1 million a year. And I remember, I'm a numbers guy, so I kind of crunched the numbers, and I said, my goal was if I get to this 20 apartments, it equates to almost $1 million a year in revenue, which would be like 500,000 and probably profit if you do it right. So that was always kind of like what I was shooting for, but it seemed like such a long, we're never gonna get there. That's like a pie in the sky number, and it's but what wound up happening is we got there, and then you're like, well, what do I want now? I mean, so you get yourself or at least I did. I was kind of in an existential well, what do I really want? And at one point I was like, well, that's it. We're not going to get anything else. We got what we wanted. But something actually wound up happening is we started looking for other opportunities, and I ended up doing a much bigger deal than I should have. And I wound up doing a deal for 52 apartments. That was kind of like the moment that changed everything for us, where we went from kind of like this kind of hobby $1 million business to well, we then once again put everything on the line. Because like to put together that deal, we're competing. I don't know if you ever heard of Saunders. Well, if you haven't, Saunders just went public for $1 billion valuation. And we were competing for like this deal with this $1 billion company. And we were able to get the deal. But getting the deal was just half the battle. At the end of the day, you had to like then make the deal work. And once we realized like everybody involved had to go all in. And that meant like everything that I had worked for again had to be put on the line. And it was scary. It was a scary time, and it was a different skill set. Once we got to that skill set, like having 20 units, that's why you see a lot of these guys, they have horses or whatever, and they have 10 units. Like what they do, then that's why they can never figure out how the hell do you get a 50-unit building or something? How do you do all this stuff? Because until you do it, I mean, it's not something that anybody can tell you. And they first of all, you need millions of dollars to do a deal like that. So first of all, you have to start with millions of dollars to do a deal like that. And I didn't have millions of dollars either when I did it. We partnered up with a few people, and we put together the $1 million that it took to start. and then we learned I had to learn how to operate like a hotel, which is a completely different monster. And then I got really good at systems, like the true automation. Once you have that many apartments, if you don't automate, like you lose your time. Basically you're working 24 hours a day to keep the plane in the air, basically. So we learned the automation tools that it took to operate something like that. And after like 11 months, we were able to be successful at that. And it was like a game changer, because now we were operating at a level of like a Fortune 500 type company, because those type of deals get you in the door to a lot of other big deals like that, because like, oh, these guys were able to do this. Maybe call them up and see if they'll do it for you too. And that's kind of how I wind up getting some of these deals, because people know that we were able, and we've been able to consistently be able to like perform on that level of rent payment. Because like, I don't know what, like most people have an understanding of what the rent commitment is on something like that. Is $250,000 a month in rents, that you're paying out to these landlords. And once you're able to pay that, and the word gets out, then those deals become easier and easier to get, because the credit's not even a factor at that point. Because even when I was doing the first deal, my credit was still jacked up. I was still, I was like that. When we got to, I was like, these guys find me out when they run my credit.
So real quick, I think there's something interesting. So 52-unit building, you were able to put that deal together, but you pulled your resources together. You said you had to create some partnerships to make this happen.
Of course.
Then the commitment, you said, is $250,000 a month. So one thing I always talk about is the importance of reserves. And in some of my different mentorship, I talk about reserves so much, I know it probably gets on people's nerves, but it's really, really important in all businesses. So as you're scaling up to this level, like, how's your reserve set up? Because let's dig in a little bit. Like, so what's the level of reserve that you want to have in place to make sure that you are protected as you're running this play?
Well, at first, I had to tell you, we were running real thin. We had no reserves, but as we scaled, obviously you're operating at a level that reserve requirements are they get real, and this is the only reason we were actually able to survive COVID. Is because when the music stopped, like our business, just so you understand, the music is never meant to stop. Like travel doesn't ever stop, so there is no plan to like stop operating for 6 months or something. It's just not. It's not in the owner's manual. So like we could stop operating for a week, a month, And like, we had reserves, enough reserves to cover 7 months of no operations. and uh, and that was the difference between us and a lot of the other companies. Like there was like right before COVID, another company was actually going to buy our business for $3 million, and I turned down the offer, and I felt like an idiot once COVID hit. But guess what happened to that company? We're talking about reserves. They didn't have because their rent commitments, and mine were $250,000. They're like 20 times my size. So they have $5 million a month in rent commitments, and they didn't have enough to make it even 30 days. So they defaulted on all their leases. And that's something you really have to be aware of, that you have to have some kind of reserves to operate a business.
And I think too, even on the regular real estate side, so we had 53 units, we sold a couple, so we're down to 49 right now. Looking to get back up to 60 by February. But if we didn't have reserves in place, we also could have got killed in COVID. But you brought up a good point. Somebody tried to, buy your business for $3 million. Somebody tried to buy 50% of our business for $500,000. And the funny thing is, we also turned them down. And when I look at what we did, COVID really helped us a lot. Probably you too, because they pumped so much money back into the economy that things moved back at a rapid speed. But the funny thing is, like, we're focused on cash flow with our real estate portfolio, not so much the appreciation. But we literally doubled in value over the course of 13 months, from the portfolio being 2.1 to over 4 million. And that was by accident, because we're set up off cash flow. So the evaluation of what the offer was based off cash flow. But just think, if we would have sold half, and then we got to a point now where that appreciated to the point that it did, and that money they were trying to buy half the company, we was able to pull that out and still have low leverage on all the units. So I know you're probably like in a similar situation where, thank God you didn't sell, because look at everything that's happened now and some of the other opportunities that have came your way over the past year.
Yeah, imagine, like, we wound up being in a fortunate position because a lot of the competition went away. So, and now it's slowly coming back, but like now I was able to scale back up, because what I didn't tell you is, like, we went from all those units, and during COVID, we actually wound up back almost to square one. We were back at 7 units, because like a lot of the developers and stuff, they lost appetite for risk. And a lot of the other players were actually defaulting on leases and stuff. So our main developer, he wound up paying us $250,000 to vacate. So,
hold on. So that was cash for keys at a level I've never heard before. So he paid you $250,000 to say, hey, I just need you to walk away.
Yeah, like, because our lease says we don't have to pay rent in a commercial transaction like that when there's a national emergency. And we were able to abate, they're called rent abatements. We were able to abate rent using, like, he used a strategy where we donated the use of the portfolio to the health system. And then he was able to get some money from the health system somehow, I'm sure. And that was profitable for him. So he was cool abating rents for 3 months. But then when the second shutdown came along for him, he was no longer in a position to comfortably abate rents at that level. So for him, it was, he told us, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. I know you guys can't operate because it'll be you could, but you'd be breaking the law, and then I would be an accomplice. So so here's some money. I need you guys to vacate the premises in 30 days, and he told us, operate for the 30 days too, do whatever you want. But on the first, the place has to be how we gave it to you. So we had to have a 52-unit move out. So that was an experience, and we learned a lot from it. And look, we turned it into a win because we were good tenants and we paid. They knew that it was the right thing to pay us something to buy us out, basically, out of our lease.
At that point, what was kind of the thought process of next steps? So you go from scaling and controlling a 52 unit building, now you're down to 7. So what was kind of the thought process on what?
Well, the thought process there is, I started doing the math and I started thinking, well, at what point I have to time this right, I said, because I'm gonna have to start getting units, but I have to, I have to slow down because there's no point of getting units at that moment. But I have to get in, I have to get into the pool before most people will. So whatever I do, I'm gonna lose money for a few months. But if I get in early, I'm gonna control more real estate than most people. So that's kind of the thought process and how I went about then rescaling. It was just like, I waited, I think, until about September or something like that. And then I started making offers on huge deals. Like, and I knew that there would be, somebody would bite because somebody needed to get paid. So, and somebody did bite, and I knew exactly what would happen. We would lose some money, and I was prepared to lose a little bit of money for some time, knowing that there would be an increase in travel, and it was a calculated risk that I took when I did that.
All right, so question, once again, let's get inside the book. So how do you know that something's a good deal? Like what's that gut and you say, you do your research, your market research, and you decide you think this is a good deal. And then once you figure out it's a good deal, do you have like a specific amount that you're looking to make within like that first 6 months, and you got goals that are built in? And
well,
it's a good deal. Give me a little insight on that.
It's a little bit a combination of a few things. Like a good deal for me, I have to be able to pretty much get my investment in the deal out in 3 months. So that, and a minimum of positive revenue of $1,000 per door. That's kind of like the equation that I've been using for a long time.
Okay, so for somebody out there that just wants to get started, what's that process look like, or how's it structured when you're trying to work the deal out with the landlord, and what kind of capital would they need to set up that first 1 or 2 Airbnb?
Well, I mean, it just depends how you want to do it and what market you're in. But let's say in my market, if you wanted to compete against somebody like me, like a level of like corporate style housing, like what I have, you would need a minimum of 10 to 12,000 per door to acquire units. So if you wanted to get 10 units, you needed about 120K, and that'll get you in the door, and there you're positive, 10,000 a month in gains on the bare minimum, but hopefully it's a lot more than that. Like some units by themselves make 5,000-6,000 profit. So, but you always, like when you're running your numbers, you basically have to know what your worst case scenario is, and always forecast based on the worst case scenario, and know what your best case scenario is, but never run your forecast based on that.
Good. So another thing I want to ask you, so we're big on multiple streams of income. So how many ways are you making money from Airbnb, and what was that moment when you decided to transition into some of the rental car stuff and then start tying them together and kind of make those work simultaneously?
Well, I mean, like within the Airbnb business, there are multiple ways to make money just within. And that's how we started learning that as we had a much bigger operation of over 100 units, where like first thing that we started monetizing was parking. Like with that level of like number of units, like it could be $30,000 a month. You could make just parking. So, like that's good money. And, you could like use that money for more units. And there's other things that we actually also monetize, like services, vending. Vending's a big one for us, actually. Vending and ATM machines in buildings. Like if you have a vending machine, it could actually make you 10 grand a month in a big enough building. And you own that. I like stuff like that. I realized how to own all those assets and make it belong to my company. Because a lot of buildings and stuff, they'll outsource that and kind of like share or like charge the vending operator like a rent. But since it's my business building, when I rent the whole building, I then go out and like put a vending machine there, put a ATM machine, and get all those multiple streams of income. And then like different services that we charge our guests, like coming in early or checking out late or storing their stuff. All that stuff adds up to like a lot of money at the end of the year. And then once we like added the rent-a-car portion to it, and we're still fine tuning the rent-a-car business to make it more and more profitable. But you add that into the equation, and then it makes it seamless for certain customers. Like, let's say you want your car waiting for you there at your Airbnb, it's waiting. And I'm thinking of better ways to do that too, where maybe the car is included in their booking somehow. And it's like a one payment to me, like, oh, pay me an extra $100 a night and you have a car. And that way I don't have to pay fees to Turo. I just have to figure out how the insurance would work in that situation. Once I have that all fine-tuned, I'm sure you could have like 6 or 7 cars at one property and just churn them through the process there.
That's a great idea. And I think we can talk offline on working with a couple commercial, well, not commercial, because that's where people get confused when we talk rental car stuff. You got your regular insurance, then you got commercial insurance, then you got fleet insurance. People a lot of times confuse the commercial insurance with the fleet insurance. So, that commercial insurance, this is attached to a vehicle that's in the business name. But if you're specifically running it as a rental car business, then that's where you want to get into the fleet insurance. And, we actually just stepped into that arena about a month and a half ago. So that's fresh. So we're in the process of transitioning some of the cars out the personal name into the business name, so they could be part of the fleet. And now we got more options to do different things on the private rental side with less risk. So, that's something that we're in the process of doing right now.
Yeah, and that's stuff that I'm working on myself to try to get the commercial insurance. I think we may have lost you.
There, the camera.
I think we lost your camera. Oh,
Sure.
Now you're back. All right. So yeah, so I'm working, I'm kind of working through the same thing to try to figure out the best way to protect my assets when I do that. And, and I personally think in situations like that, even though, we would all want a bunch of like luxury cars, I think like more mid-range cars would probably be more beneficial in situations where you're doing those direct rentals like that.
Totally agree. Just having that combination of both, but there's less risk with the economy of just finding the right niche of where you want to focus. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost in the sauce. They want to do everything, so they're trying to focus on what's going to work for me. And once you figure out what's going to work for you, then it's easier to get to a point of scalability and also being successful, because you're not trying to do 4 or 5 things at once. Because there's multiple different things that you could do in the rental car space and real estate space and Airbnb space, but focusing on that primary niche. And then if you add on things after you master one thing, but if you're working on 4 or 5 things at once, you don't give yourself a chance to master anything.
Exactly. And that's why, like, imagine I haven't really done anything other than the Airbnb thing forever, and now I've transitioned into the rent-a-car thing. And look, I'm doing this mentoring and all this stuff. I've never considered doing any of that before, and I wouldn't have felt comfortable mentoring or teaching anybody 5 years ago, until I've like really gone through the ringer and done a few like major losses and major wins. And then you could teach people, because then you have a broad range of experience, and you could like really show people, hey, look, if you do it like this, you're going to be good, and you do it like that, you're going to lose some money, and that's good.
That's key. So couple more questions. I don't want to hold you too long. So to the people out there, what's the importance of mentorship, and why do you feel that it's important to get into a mentorship when you're trying to enter into a new type of business or a new industry?
Well, I mean, mentorship is key, I think, because especially if you have little knowledge of an industry. Like, look, imagine in my cigar business, if I would have found like a true mentor in that business, I think they would have been able to guide me, and I would have lost everything because I just didn't have all the information. You know, I was just shooting from the hip. So having a mentor really like is a way, like a fast pass to avoid those pitfalls. You know, you're paying the mentor, like a lot of people say, for their mistakes, so you don't have to make them yourself. And that's the great thing with mentorship. And it's a two-way street too, because as like mentoring people has helped me quite a bit to also fine tune my processes and think about, you know, other ways of making my Airbnb business better, or like, because now I'm like interacting with different ideas and, you know, different viewpoints that I never had. So it also helps the mentor quite a bit. So it's a good relationship, I think.
So what would you say separates you from other people that might offer some kind of mentorship and a course in the same space?
Well, I mean, I think very few people operating at like my level of units would consider doing a mentorship, really, because it's a different type of business. So what you learn from me is operating a big business, which includes systems and procedures that, like a lot of the other, you know, courses or people out there, you know, they're selling you some kind of like dream to like travel and live for, you know, like have a few Airbnbs and travel, and that's cool if that's what you want to do. But if you want to make a lot of money and run a big company, then, you know, that's what I do. I don't have like some business where you know, I have a couple Airbnbs and I go on trips and stuff. I'm running a real big company. And if that's what you want to do, I'm
So if somebody was interested in joining your mentorship, what's the process? What's the price point, and what value do you feel you're bringing to the table that's going to prepare them to, when they're done with the mentorship, go out and execute?
Well, one of the great things about the mentorship, especially like my top tier mentorship, is in that program you get to participate in deals with me. So like right now, we're here in Tampa, where that's where I am right now, and we're setting up one unit for me and two units for two different students. So basically, once they've shown me first of all that they've done, like we have something called phase one, where they've made phone calls, they've spoken to enough realtors, they've gone out there, they've done enough, and they probably got themselves a unit on their own. Then I would consider them as somebody that I could trust to be partners with me in a deal. And there you get into one of these premium units or buildings with me. And then you get the opportunity to like not only like talk about it, but to be there with me and set up the place and see the entire process from the moment we get the keys to completion. So that's a unique proposition that, look, like a lot of people today, even that weren't involved in that transaction, came down to see it in person because they're in my mentorship, and that's another benefit, that you get to come down and participate firsthand in the making or execution of a unit like that. And this one's part of like a 30-unit piece, so there'll be a few students that are going to be qualifying to get units in that particular building with me.
Sounds great. And a lot of my students also are interested in Airbnb. So, you know, we might have to have another conversation offline. Maybe you join one of the masterminds for 15, 20 minutes and kind of give a quick overview of Airbnb. Like I say, that's not my lane. And I look forward to us getting our first deal together and, you know, creating a partnership and doing some great things, because I feel like we're both adding value to our communities. And I think there's so much more that could be done. So, you know, last question I want to ask, if you were to put out your book on yourself, what would be the title of that book?
Oh, that's an easy one. Happy Travels from 0 to 100 million. You know, that's an easy one.
So before we wrap up for the night, any last words you'd like to say or put out there to the community?
Oh man, guys, just, you know, tap in, follow us at Brickell Cigars. We're always doing interesting stuff. And it was a pleasure to be a part of this.
And here we have it, Brickell Cigars, the king of Airbnb, as I like to call them. This was episode number 5 of Inside the Books, brought to you by the T Rankin Insurance Agency. Catch you on the next episode.